Hello friends, this is Navdeep Singh from Hitbullseye.com. In our today's lecture, we'll be discussing about world history and in that about major revolutions in the world. The topics for today's discussion would be firstly the Industrial Revolution, the American Revolution, French Revolution and lastly the Russian Revolution. So starting with Industrial Revolution and moving on chronologically, first of all these were the Industrial Revolution. Let us discuss about the causes of Industrial Revolution. Firstly, it started in England and its major reason was the agriculture revolution in 18th century. Because of that, there was excessive food production and with the consumption of what people could indulge into productive activity, availability of excess labor because of population boom or demographic dividend at that point in time in England, the financial capacity of people in England to invest in newer technologies, newer ventures and indulge into means of capitalism, and lastly various technological advances at that point in time in England itself which had led to the Industrial Revolution. So let us talk about what the events of Industrial Revolution were and what these specific technological advances in England that had occurred at that time were. Firstly, it was the invention of steam power or steam engine by a very famous personality, Thomas Newcomen and James Watt. We must have heard about James Watt in our physics series when we learn about means of energy. And these could be used, or steam power could be used in transportation, in textile and steel industries. So this was the importance of steam power or steam engines at that point in time. Next was that people started using iron and steel for manufacturing of various items. Before that, iron and steel were not being used in mass production. Now we started making use, or people in England or capitalists in England started making use of iron and steel at that point in time. And a very famous process or name of the person associated is Henry Bessemer. And he invented the Bessemer's process by which we could manufacture steel very efficiently. The development of coal industry at that point in time in England is again very important. We commonly know that the Pennines in England are the repository of coal. So the mineral exploitation at that point in England started and coal could be made use of in that point in time. Next is new means of transportation such as railways and water navigation. The person involved or associated with the invention of railways is George Stephenson. So all these were the technological advances or events that had happened in the Industrial Revolution which helped changing the face of industry in England and later in other parts of the world too. Let us discuss about the effects of Industrial Revolution. Now among various effects, we can categorize each and every effect into three major classes. Firstly, the economic effects, the social effects and lastly the political effects. So let us discuss about the economic effects of Industrial Revolution. Firstly, as we all know, the economic effect of Industrial Revolution was birth of capitalism. After capitalism, there was an increase in production of goods in the economy. And such increase in production in goods in the economy also led to decrease in prices of goods in the economy. And with that, there was high amount of circulation of currency and money in the economy which led to upliftment of various sections in the economy. After the economic effects are the social effects. While discussing social effects, we can talk about the rise of middle class and also the breakdown of joint families. With that, we can also associate reasons or things such as exploitation of children and women by making them do excessive work beyond their human capacity as also the social effect of Industrial Revolution. Coming to political effects. Firstly, it is very commonly said that Industrial Revolution led to colonization. as various countries, including England, indulged into acquiring new markets and new areas of selling their goods. In the political effects, we can also discuss the birth of trade unions, which is also one of the very major contribution or major effect in the fields of labor reforms. So these are the major effects of industrial revolution, and after the industrial revolution we all come to know that how the face of industry changed for the times to come. After the industrial revolution is the American Revolution. Now when we talk about the American Revolution, we have to first know about the causes which led to a revolution in America. America before the revolution was a British colony consisting of 13 colonies in total. There were many reasons of American Revolution. Amongst those, the popular were ideas and principles. Various new ideas and principles such as love for freedom, liberty, fundamental rights, rights of men and women had cropped up through intellectualism or intellectual awakening by various theorists in America. Second is ill governance in colonies. As we discussed that there was a British colonialism in America consisting of 13 colonies. In each and every colony there was system of administration which was not at all to the liking of the American locals at that point. Britishers would make policies which would be very suitable for their own selves without any regard to the local population. So the bad governance or issue of governance in America by the British was a very big cause of American Revolution. Next is taxation of colonies. The Britishers, again continuing the previous point of ill governance, by bringing various new taxes such as Stamp Act, Sugar Act, Townshend Act, had such an impact on the American economy and on the American people that they were very much disenchanted by British governance and British policies. Next is excessive regulation. Now this has to do with the way or means in which American would trade with the rest of the world. British had brought in policies and regulations which would restrict American trade with other parts of the world, especially in items in which the British had an upper hand. For example, tea. The British would make such regulations which would make it difficult for Americans to trade tea with other parts of the world. And last of the major causes is the Boston Massacre of 1770. In this massacre, the British troops had taken up firing upon the innocent people and killed 5 of them in Boston, that is a place in America. All these reasons led to a revolt or a revolution against the British setup in America. Now let us discuss about the events that had happened during the American Revolution. First is the Boston Tea Party of 1773. This was an incident or an event in which people headed by a person named Samuel Adams, they went into a ship which was carrying British goods and threw those items or goods, especially tea, into the Atlantic, thereby declaring full-fledged revolt against the British and against the British policies. Next is the First Continental Congress held in 1974 in a place called Philadelphia. In this, all the colonies had taken part except one colony, which was Georgia. And in this Continental Congress, they had declared that they are not happy with the way in which the British were conducting trade, and they demanded that if they are to be taxed upon, they have to be some representation in the British Parliament. After this, we come across various minor skirmishes in places such as Lexington and Concord. In these skirmishes, the sepoy at that time in America was called Minutemen. These were people of irregular army which would face the British army at that point in time. Next is the Declaration of Independence, and this is very important, the date of 4th July 1776. In this, declaration. This is again famously also called as the Second Continental Congress of 1776. It was headed by Thomas Jefferson, and it was full-fledged declaration that we are going against the British from now on and will do nothing less than complete independence. After that, they indulged into warfare. In warfare, there were two sides again. The American people being represented by General Washington, and on the other hand, the British being represented by General Cornwallis. In this, obviously, the American headed by General Washington won the battle and won the war, and the Britishers had to surrender. After this, with various negotiations, there was a Treaty of Paris signed in 1783 between the two sides, which said clearly that British from now onwards would have no right over the American lands. Now let us discuss about the consequences or effects of American Revolution on themselves as on other parts of the world. Firstly, British focus on other colonies increased, especially in India. So we can relate how the American Revolution had an effect on Indian history as well. Secondly, it also led to rise of capitalism, because America, now being independent, can formulate its own thought, can formulate its own policies, and which ultimately resulted in capitalism, which as of today we all know what it is. Newer political concepts such as democracy, fundamental rights, and other things also started to become much more prevalent and propagated to other parts of the world too. American Revolution also led to revolutions in other parts of the world, especially in French, and other parts such as Spain and Ireland were also affected. But French Revolution was again one of the biggest consequences of American Revolution. So let us discuss about French Revolution. And while discussing, we would firstly discuss the causes which led to French Revolution. First cause is that related to social causes. The French society in that time was divided into three classes. First was that headed by the church. Second was that headed by the nobility. And third was that of common people or peasants at that time. This much differentiation of society into three parts angered the third part or the most depraved part. The third or the common people were much more disenchanted, because it was the third estate or the common people who had to bear brunt of financing the state by taking care of taxation. This was the class which was taxed the most. Church and nobility were exempted from any kind of economic effect or economic burden of the state. Next is the political causes. In political causes, the king at that point in time was Louis XV. This king was, or emperor was, very much famous for his maladministration in the state. He had taken the least care of administering his state in a good fashion, which led to resentment among the people, and people started revolting against the monarchy. Third is the economic causes. As we had discussed earlier, that the third estate consisting of common people was the one which was taxed the most. And it was about 95% of the population that consisted of the third estate. Now this much amount of population was burdened with so high amount of taxes that they felt that it is very much unfair and they should revolt against it. Last of the causes is the intellectual awakening. We have thinkers such as Voltaire, Danton, Montesquieu, Rousseau and others who had contributed much to the French Revolution by introducing texts and introducing thoughts such as liberty and freedom to people, and people in their own selves had decided that the old system won't work. We need to bring in new systems such as those propounded by Voltaire, Danton, Montesquieu and others. And which led to the French Revolution. Let us discuss the various events that had happened during the French Revolution. With all those causes, the third estate was very much disenchanted. To address the things of the third estate, or to address the grouses of the third estate, the emperor had called a estates general meeting. There was high amount of malpractices which were taken up in this meeting, with the common people or the third estate people not being allowed to represent themselves fully, again leading to disenchantment. There being disenchantment, they took up an oath in a nearby tennis court, which was popularly called as the tennis court oath. In this oath, they took upon themselves that they'll not return home until and unless they form a new constitution. So, in the tennis court oath, it was firmly decided by the third estate people that they will bring in a new constitutional system and do away with the previous monarchical system. To create a new constitution, they led to the formation of a national assembly, in which people from various walks of life would participate and contribute to the constitution making process. The National Assembly created a new constitution which gave all the powers to the Directory of Five. Now, this Directory of Five was responsible for the administration of the country, and this administration again took place after the King Louis XV, Louis XVI and their wife Marie Antoinette were executed. So all the processes or systems of administration were done by this Directory of Five. With this much taking place in the French Revolution, let us discuss what the effects of French Revolution were. Firstly, it led to the demise of serfdom and fiefdom. So now new principles such as liberty, equality, freedom, freedom of thought and such other principles came up. French Revolution also led to the rise of Napoleon and revival of French pride, which was very much brought to naught in the events that had happened during the French Revolution. So this is about the French Revolution. After the French Revolution, the major revolution that had happened in the world was the Russian Revolution. So while discussing Russian Revolution, let us discuss what the causes were which led to the Russian Revolution. In Russian Revolution, we have to keep in mind that there were various stages. Stage 1 was a revolution or a mini revolution in 1905. And stage 2 was the main revolution that we are going to talk about, which happened in 1917. In the 1905 year, people had revolted against the practices of the Emperor of Russia, Nicholas. And Nicholas had given various reforms, had taken up various reforms for the people, like setting up an assembly which would be called Duma, various land reforms, industrial reforms and other things. But till the coming of 1917, people were unhappy with the means by which Nicholas and his system of Duma were working. So, failure of these reforms was one of the causes of Russian Revolution. After that, the industrial unrest. In the year 1916-1970, there were unrests of about 2,000 industrial units in the country. So this speaks of industrial unrest in the Russian country, and which led to the Russian Revolution as well. Revivalism of revolutionary parties such as Social Democrat Labour Party. This was one of the major parties which, as we popularly know, consisted of Mensheviks and Bolsheviks. So this revival of parties also was one of the causes of the Russian Revolution. And last was the failure of land reforms, because the earlier governments had decided that people would be given land so that they can earn a livelihood for themselves. But failure of such land reforms was again one of the major causes of Russian Revolution. After having discussed the causes of Russian Revolution, let us discuss the events that had happened during the Russian Revolution. The Duma's advice to Nicholas was to set up a constitutional monarchy. and his abdication in favor of his brother Michael and subsequent refusal of Michael to take up the throne led to the downfall of monarchy. After this, there was a formation of provisional governments by the party that we had already discussed, the Social Democrat Labour Party. They form a provisional government in a place called Petrograd. This is today's state St. Petersburg. It was earlier called Petrograd. And after that, consolidation of those provisional governments in Petrograd as well as in other parts of the Russian landscape by Lenin and other Bolsheviks. These were the major events that had happened during the Russian Revolution. Talking about the effects or consequences of Russian Revolution. Firstly, it had led to the end of monarchy. As you all know, monarchy was being headed by Nicholas and on his advice by Michael. With the Russian Revolution and with the coming of Bolsheviks and Lenin into power, there was an end of monarchy for times to come. Also, birth of socialism. We have to associate socialism with communism as well, and these were the two concepts that were again propped up by the political parties, namely the Bolsheviks. The Russian Revolution had also led to the end of war, or rather end of Russian participation in World War I against Germany with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. And with this treaty, the Russian participation in the war came to an end. These three were the major effects of Russian Revolution. And this was all about Russian Revolution that I had to discuss about. So, in today's lecture, we have discussed about various revolutions or major revolutions in the world: industrial, the American, the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution, and interlinking them and looking at them, what were the causes, what were the events, and lastly, effects or consequences of each and every revolution in the world. Thank you.